Welcome back to the deep dive. Ready to dive into another user manual?
Always up for a challenge. What do we got this time?
All right, so this one is for the B3 system. Sounds pretty techy, right?
Yeah, a little bit. But I'm sure we can uncover some interesting stuff in there.
I think so too. Okay, so the B3 system, it's all about monitoring, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Think of it like a really, really attentive guardian, always keeping an eye on things.
Well, like in a lab, for example.
Exactly. Labs, hospitals, anywhere you've got sensitive stuff that needs to be monitored constantly. Temperature, humidity, pressure,
Yeah.
you name it.
And it sends out alerts if anything goes wrong, like if the temperature gets too high or something.
Yep. You get instant notifications, email, text, even a phone call if it's really urgent.
Wow, that's pretty intense. So this isn't just for like one specific type of environment then?
Nope, that's what's so cool about it. It's
Okay.
super versatile. Can be used in all sorts of places.
Makes sense. And this isn't some brand new system either, right?
No, not at all. They've been doing this for over 20 years. So there's a lot of experience behind it.
20 years. That's reassuring.
Definitely. Especially in this kind of field, reliability is key.
Okay, let's jump into the user manual then, see what we can find.
Sounds good to me.
All right, so first up, logging in. Looks like you've got a couple of options there.
Yeah, standard username and password. Or you can use your Active Directory account if you have one.
Oh, that's convenient.
It is. But there's a little twist there. You can log in with your AD account, but you can only sign events using a specific Boomerang 3 user account.
Wait, why is that? Seems a bit unnecessary.
It's all about security and accountability. They want to make sure everything is tracked properly. So even if you log in with your AD credentials, you still need that separate B3 account to sign off on things.
Okay, that makes sense. Extra layer of security.
Exactly. And it helps with auditing later on if they need to track who did what.
Right. I also noticed this automatic logout feature. After 20 minutes of inactivity, you're out.
Yeah, that's pretty standard these days. Again, it's all about security, especially in places like hospitals or labs where data privacy is crucial.
True. Okay, what else? They talk about this scope review thing.
Ah, yes. Basically, what you see in the system depends on your permissions and the time range you've selected.
So it's like a personalized view of the data.
Exactly. You only see what's relevant to your role and the task at hand.
Makes sense. Oh, and this is interesting. They say every single change in the system needs a user signature.
Yeah, I noticed that too. Every little tweak, someone has to sign off on it.
Why so strict?
Audit trail. It's all about having a clear record of who made what changes and when. Makes it much easier to track things if there's ever a problem.
Ah, I see. So it's not just about preventing accidental changes. It's about knowing exactly who did what, even if it was intentional.
Precisely. Accountability is key in these systems.
Okay, time range selection looks pretty flexible. You can zoom in on the last 24 hours, the last week, or even set a custom time frame.
Yeah, that's great for analysis. You can really focus in on the data you need.
Now let's talk about the B3 dashboard. This is like the central hub of the whole system, right?
Absolutely. It gives you a quick overview of everything that's going on.
And they've made it very visual, from what I can tell. Color-coded alarm indicators, a clear view of the system structure.
Yeah, they've put a lot of thought into the user interface. It needs to be intuitive, especially if you're dealing with time-sensitive situations. You need to be able to grasp the information quickly.
Right. Speaking of the system structure, they describe it as hierarchical, like a family tree.
Yeah, it's very organized. You've got groups, divisions, objects, gateways, measuring points, all very logical.
And that helps with managing the data, I guess.
Absolutely. And access control, too.
Yeah.
Different users might only have permission to see certain branches of that tree, so to speak.
Okay, now let's get to the object view. Lots of different tabs here, each one giving you a different perspective on the object you've selected.
Yeah, it's like having a toolkit for analyzing each object. You can look at graphs, lists, activity logs, properties, even documents associated with that object.
Intriguing. What about the graph tab? What kind of insights can you get from there?
Well, it's all about visualizing the data, right? Seeing how things change over time. You could see temperature fluctuations or track the stability of a piece of equipment, for example.
So it helps you spot patterns and potential issues.
Exactly. And it can help you understand how different parameters relate to each other.
And then there's the logbook tab. What's that all about?
Think of it as a detailed history of everything that's happened related to that object. Control point sign-offs, user comments, attached documents. It's all there.
Sounds like a good place to go for a deep dive then.
Definitely. Especially if you're investigating an incident or just trying to understand the history of that object.
No, one thing that surprised me is how much detail they go into about technical stuff, like battery levels and sensors,
Yeah.
radio transmission quality, even the temperature of the system components.
Yeah, they've really thought of everything. It's all about ensuring the reliability of the entire system.
Right, because if those underlying components aren't working properly, the data might be compromised.
Exactly. So they monitor all those technical aspects to make sure everything is running smoothly.
Okay, alarms and warnings, those seem pretty central to the whole system, right?
Definitely. They're how the system alerts you to potential problems.
Yeah, so what's the difference between an alarm and a warning?
Well, a warning is like a heads up, something to keep an eye on, but not necessarily an immediate crisis. An alarm is more serious. It means something is definitely wrong and needs attention right away.
And you get notified about these events in real time.
Yep. However you've set it up. Email, text, phone call. You choose what works best for you.
And just like any other change in the system, you have to sign off on an alarm once you've dealt with it.
Right. That way there's a record of who acknowledged the alarm and what action they took.
So again, it's all about accountability. Now, these control points, those are interesting. It's like having a to-do list for the lab, right?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. They remind you of tasks that need to be done regularly. Calibrations, cleaning, equipment checks, that sort of thing.
And these tasks are often tied to specific quality standards and regulations, I imagine.
Often, yes. So it helps labs demonstrate that they're following the rules and doing things properly.
Right, so it's not just about reminders, it's about making sure those essential tasks are done, and there's a record of it.
Precisely.
Okay, reports. The B3 system seems to generate all sorts of reports. What's the point of those?
Well, they're great for documentation and analysis. You can generate reports on specific groups of measuring points, individual objects, or even the entire system.
And these reports can be automated, right?
Yeah, you can set them up to run on a schedule and be delivered straight to your inbox. Saves a lot of time.
That's handy, especially if you need to track data over time or demonstrate compliance with regulations.
Absolutely. Those reports can be really valuable for all sorts of things.
And finally, document management. The B3 system seems to have a built-in system for storing and organizing documents.
Yeah, it's like a central repository for all the important documents related to the system. Equipment manuals, calibration certificates, procedures. Everything's in one place.
So it's all about knowledge management and efficiency then.
Exactly. Having
Yeah.
all that documentation easily accessible makes everyone's lives easier.
Well, this B3 system seems incredibly comprehensive. They've thought of everything.
It really does. It's a
Wow.
very impressive system for monitoring and managing critical data.
But you know what really stands out to me?
What's that?
It's the potential, Like, imagine this level of monitoring, but in other industries.
Oh, absolutely. The possibilities are huge.
Like food production, maybe?
Yeah,
Keeping tabs on the temperature of everything from farm to table.
exactly. Or monitoring the structural integrity of bridges in real time.
Wow, yeah. That would be amazing.
It could revolutionize so many things.
Okay, but let's get back to the B3 system for now. We were talking about measuring points, right?
Right. And there are actually different types of those.
Oh, really? Like what?
Well, you've got your basic measuring points. Those are the ones connected to the sensors, collecting data on things like temperature, humidity,
Yeah.
whatever you need to monitor.
So, like, in a lab setting, they'd be attached to refrigerators, freezers, incubators, things like that.
Exactly. Then there are transport points. They monitor things during transit.
Ah, so like a temperature logger that goes with the shipment of vaccines.
Yep. Make sure they stay within the right temperature range the whole way.
That's pretty cool. What about control points? Those are different, right?
Yeah, control points are more like reminders for tasks that need to be done regularly, not directly measuring anything.
Like calibrating equipment or cleaning a work area.
Exactly. They pop up on your dashboard when it's time to do something.
So it's like a built-in system for making sure things don't get forgotten.
Right. Helps keep everyone on track.
Makes sense. And then there are these technical points. What are those all about?
Those monitor the B3 system itself.
The system itself.
Yeah, things like battery levels in the sensors, signal strength, even the temperature of the system's components.
So it's keeping an eye on its own health, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That way they can spot any potential problems with the system itself before it affects the data.
That's smart. Okay, so how do you actually work with all these measuring points in the system?
Well, the first thing is to find the ones you're interested in, obviously. You can create custom views so you don't get overwhelmed with data from every single point.
Right, because depending on your role, you might only care about certain ones.
Exactly. And then you can use the different tools in the system to analyze the data, the graph tab, the list tab. Those are good places to start.
And if you need more detail, there's always the activity log.
Right. It keeps track of everything that's happened for each point. Changes to settings, alarm events, the whole history.
Makes sense. Now, we talked about alarms before. How do those work with the measuring points?
Each point has its own set of alarm limits. If a reading goes outside those limits, an alarm is triggered.
And those limits are customizable, right?
Absolutely. You can set them to whatever you need for each specific point.
So if you're monitoring the temperature of a fridge full of, like, important medication, you set the limits to a very narrow range.
Exactly. And you can even set it up so that the alarm doesn't trigger unless it's outside the limit for a certain number of readings.
Oh, that's smart. Helps avoid false alarms from, like, random fluctuations.
Right. And you can also disable alarms temporarily if you need to do maintenance on a point.
Like if you need to defrost a freezer or something.
Exactly. You wouldn't want the alarm going off every 5 seconds while you're doing that.
Makes sense. Okay, so we've got measuring points, alarms. What about those control points? How do those work in practice?
Well, each one is a task, right, with a deadline. When that deadline arrives, the control point pops up as a reminder.
And the tasks could be anything from, like, basic equipment checks to more complex procedures.
Yeah, anything that needs to be done regularly. And once you've done it, you sign off on the control point.
So there's a record that it was done and who did it.
Exactly. And if it doesn't get signed off by the deadline, the system can escalate it to someone else.
So nothing gets missed. I like it. It's all about accountability.
Right. And building a culture of responsibility.
Okay, what about reports? The B3 system seems to generate a lot of those.
It does. And they're really useful for analyzing data, identifying trends, even demonstrating compliance with regulations.
I bet lab managers love those reports.
Oh, yeah. And anyone involved in quality assurance, you can generate reports on specific points, objects, the whole system even.
And you can automate them, right?
Absolutely. You can set them up to run on a schedule and be delivered straight to your inbox.
That's super handy. Saves a ton of time.
Exactly. It's like having your own personal data analyst.
Okay, so we've covered measuring points, alarms, control points, reports. This B3 system is pretty comprehensive, huh?
It is. They've really thought of everything. It's a great example of a well-designed system.
But you know what keeps coming back to me?
What's that?
For me, it's that even with all this amazing technology, it's still people who are the most important part.
Oh, absolutely. It's easy to get caught up in the tech, but in the end, it's people who are making the decisions, interpreting the data, taking action.
Right. The B3 system might be super advanced, but it's still just a tool.
Exactly. It's like having a powerful telescope. The telescope can gather all this amazing data, but it's the astronomer who actually makes sense of it all.
So it's not about replacing human expertise. It's about giving people better tools.
Exactly. Augmenting our capabilities, not replacing them.
Speaking of human involvement, the user manual has a whole section on passwords.
Ah, yes. Important stuff. Especially when you're talking about a system like this, where security is so important.
And they made it really easy to reset your password if you forget it.
Yeah, the instructions are very clear, step by step, with screenshots and everything.
They really thought of everything.
They did.
Wow.
It's all about making the system user-friendly.
Right, because what's the point of having all this amazing technology if people can't even use it?
Exactly. Accessibility is key.
And it's not just about resetting passwords. They also talk about user roles and permissions, making sure people only have access to the information they need.
Right. That's crucial for data security. You don't want everyone to be able to see everything.
So, like, a lab technician might only see data from their own instruments, but a lab manager would have a broader view.
Exactly. Different levels of access for different roles.
Makes sense. Oh, and this is interesting. It looks like the B3 system can actually talk to other systems.
Oh, yeah, definitely. They've built in APIs and data export capabilities.
So it can integrate with other systems in the organization.
Absolutely. It's all about sharing data and breaking down those silos between different departments.
So, like, the B3 system could automatically send data to the lab's main database.
Exactly. Or to a reporting system.
Right.
Or, well, the possibilities are pretty much endless.
Wow, that's powerful.
It is. It really opens up a whole new world of possibilities for data analysis and process optimization.
Well, I think we've covered just about everything there is to cover on this B3 system, from the nuts and bolts of measuring points and alarms to the bigger picture of data integration and the human element.
It's been quite a deep dive.
It has. So, any final thoughts for our listeners? What should they be thinking about as they go about their day?
I think the main takeaway is that technology is an incredible tool, but it's up to us to use it wisely. The B3 system is a great example of how technology can help us do amazing things. But in the end, it's still people who are in control.
Well said. It's all about finding that balance between the power of technology and the wisdom of human judgment.
Exactly.
Well, on that note, we'd like to thank you all for joining us on this deep dive into the B3 user manual. We hope you found it informative and maybe even a little bit inspiring. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.